John Murphy at Murtech.com with your daily news update. Okay, here we are on December the 5th in the year of our Lord 2025. And as usual, I got some good stuff for you. Let's go ahead and click over here, Murtech on Rumble. And this is my Rumble channel right here. This is the video you're watching right now, episode 1767. 1767. All right, let's just jump in here. And let me pause that, close out the live chat. Let me scroll down here and click the show more button. Okay, we have information from Dr. Steve Turley, Black Conservative Perspective, Anthony Bryan Logan, and Vince Dow. But before we get into that, I do have some shout outs to get from LR Pierre, just started following my channel. Kelly Haas just started following my channel. And Herb Bosch just started following my channel. So thank you very much, folks, for following my channel. I hope you're tuned in, and I hope you enjoy the content. Alrighty, let's jump down here. And Jeanette J66 and Joe Laub just gave me a comment on my episode 1766. And Debbie BS gave me a comment on my extra 551A. So thank you, folks, for your comments. I greatly enjoy reading your feedback, and I definitely appreciate your support. So let me give that a thumbs up. Boom. And by the way, if you don't mind, if you could give me a thumbs up already, I've got 4 people watching and 3 thumbs up. That's great. Okay, so give me a thumbs up when you get tuned in here. Okay, speaking of comments of the day, let's see what Jeanette J66 had to say with her comment. Hello, love your channel. Woo! Thank you, Jeanette J66. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, at least I made somebody happy today. Okay, Dr. Steve Turley. Now we're going to jump into some information here about the FBI and this J6 suspect. And then we're going to go into some information about Minnesota and the Somalis there. But first, let's go ahead and see what Dr. Steve has to say about breaking FBI J6 suspect caught in historic arrest. Huh. Okay, let's check it out. Okay, he's actually going to go into a commercial here, but that was what he said was good, and what he said was true. And people keep bitching about, how high things are. I don't recall people bitching this much about prices going up when Biden was in office and the prices were going up. Now the prices are going down, and the mainstream media and Democrats are talking, as he said, affordability, affordability. Well, Biden's the one that got us in this situation, and it's gotten better since Trump has taken office. But you won't frickin' hear that from them, but you'll hear it from me. Okay, let's get past this. Here we go. Me too. Yes, they are. Okay, let me click on this Rumble link and show you that this video does come from Dr. Steve Turley. And I am following his channel. I've given him a thumbs up. And that link that he was talking about, I have the link to this video right in the description box. So if you want to click on that and see about that investment class that he was talking about, by all means, please do so. Okay, let's jump back here and slide down here and see what black conservative perspective. And folks, on this, okay, we're going to be talking about Minnesota and the fraud there and this J6 thing. I'll tell you what, there's corruption is being uncovered in Washington, D.C. Is it as quickly as what I would like or you would like? No. But if you're going to do it correctly, and if you're going to do it, cross all the T's and dot all the I's, you have to take your time and do it correctly. Otherwise, you know, the cases will just get thrown out of court. You know, just like with Comey and Letitia James. You know, because not every I was dotted and not every T was crossed and the commas weren't in the right place and the periods at the end of the sentence. Well, it got thrown out for the time being. Now they've got to go back and, you know, proofread what they're doing. It's amazing. With these, I'm surprised that this guy, what evidence they have, I don't know. I'm surprised this guy will be prosecuted. It's amazing. Okay, let's come down here and check out Black Conservative Perspective. Liberal media accidentally exposes more Somali fraud after Trump deranged hit peace fires backfires. Let's check this out. Oh my goodness. Now take away that Minnesota flag and let's put a Somali flag up there. There we go. The governor of Minnesota is going to put a Somali and an American flag up there. Well, I'm surprised he left the American flag. Yeah. Amazing.
light on why the fraud got so out of control in Minnesota?
I think what happened is that, when you have these kind of new programs that are designed to help people, you're oftentimes relying on third parties to be able to facilitate. And I just think that a lot of the COVID programs that were set up, they were set up so quickly that a lot of the guardrails did not get created.
Now, obviously, whatever the ethnic group, the actions of a few dozen should not impugn an entire community of thousands of people.
And yes, folks have done, horrible things, and people have committed crimes, but we should not be pointing the entire community in one brush.
I heard that MDE took this step to really stop feeding the kids in the middle of pandemic. My office had to do something.
In the video, Osmond tells the room how he arranged a call with the MDE commissioner about their attempts to stop new meal sites.
But I'm one of those people that push back and call it what it is, which is racist tactics. I told her this money is actually from the federal. Your job is to distribute fairly to the communities that deserve.
At the time he delivered this speech, Osmond's wife, Ilo Amba, was in the middle of claiming to run a meal site of her own in this small office in downtown Minneapolis that the Minnesota Attorney General in this civil complaint calls a fraudulent shell company. Public records show Amba's nonprofit Urban Advantage Services received $460,000 in reimbursements between February and November 2021. The AG shut it down, citing participation in the meal fraud scheme. What's more, testimony and evidence in Bach's ongoing trial has shown Osmond and Amba signed over control of a different, dormant nonprofit they founded together called Stigma Free. Osmond writing to its new board, quote, "I have seen growth during the time that I have served, and I'm confident you will continue to grow this amazing organization in my absence." The men who took over Stigma Free are charged with using it immediately to rack up more than $13 million in meal fraud across the state.
Councilmember Osmond, you agreed to sit down with me and talk about this week.
Osmond never returned follow-up calls or texts.
Is Councilmember Jamal Osmond in the office today?
And could not be found to answer questions at City Council or at his home.
Yeah. So you see that, you heard that. Okay. Ilhan Omar, when confronted about the fraud going on in her community, well, see, there was just not a lot of oversight on the COVID funds, right? And that's why the fraud happened, right? It's just a lack of oversight, which, again, would be the fault of the Democrats, right? The people who are in charge of overseeing the funds, right? And then, when these people are boohoo, whine, and cry racism, okay, like, for example, that Somali individual on CNN who was a part of one of these nonprofits that has been accused of fraud, right? It's racism, hate, and bigotry, right? To ask questions about, hey, there's a lot of sketchy stuff going on here, right? Meanwhile, on BS Now, you have the race hustlers claiming that President Trump's crackdown is white supremacy.
Clear, this is the first woman of color ever elected to represent her state in Congress, one of only 3 Muslim members of Congress serving right now. She was, I should also point out that in the last election, she was given that office by more than 75% of the people who voted. Mm-hmm. The president has attacked e-initiatives. He's cut refugee admissions while prioritizing South Afrikaners. He denies, of course, that some American citizens were arrested by ICE because of the color of their skin. The statistics would suggest otherwise. Where is this going? This is only day, I think it's 317 of his presidency.
Chris, we have to be honest. Trump's immigration policy is a white nationalist agenda. It's part of a white nationalist agenda. I know people get upset with that, but it's true. I think we need to be very, very clear that the idea is to make America white again. This is why I began with that nationalist conservatism movement, right? Because there's a belief that social cohesion isn't possible if you have immigration from all of these different groups. Now, mind you, we're talking about American citizens for the most part in this instance, but there's this sense that the browning of America, that these demographic shifts have to be arrested. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves is not so much how do we defend Ilhan Omar from Trump's ridiculous rhetoric. But why are we stomaching or tolerating this from the president of the United States? This is blatant racist language, Chris. How is it that this is tolerable? That the president of the United States can describe American citizens as garbage. If you call Americans deplorable, all hell breaks loose. But what is going on here? At the heart of it, I think, is this clear idea that America has to remain a white republic. And if it's not, then we are going to hell. And so that came out of the mouth, I think, that vision came out of the mouth of the president of the United States. And we have to refuse that. And if we don't, what does that say about the country?
Yeah. So you see that, you heard that. A classic deflection. Instead of addressing the fraud, instead of addressing why this happened, why this was allowed to happen, it's always the same old deflection of, well, this is white nationalism, white supremacy, racism, hate, bigotry. This is what they say. When they start screaming racism, hate, and bigotry, we got them, right? We got them. You know that you're over the target. You're over the target when they start screaming racism, hate, and bigotry, because they do not want to address the substance of what's going on here. Because addressing the substance means that you have to acknowledge that, yeah, there are real issues with this specific community in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when it comes to fraud, right? Waste, fraud, and abuse. That's just the reality. This is why you have dozens and dozens and dozens of indictments and charges against these individuals, because it's a problem, right? And
okay, I'm going to go. You pretty much get his point. Okay, this is a black man here, and he's pretty much debunking everything they say about white nationalists. So here again, he's right. They don't address the issue of all this fraud and abuse and stealing taxpayer dollars, because it was people of color that did it. Now, you know, I'm going to be honest with you. Kind of wish Trump would be a little more diplomatic in what he says, because some people do find that offensive. Okay? You know, if he would have said something about, you know, we're going to arrest all the crooks, okay, and if they don't belong in the United States legally, we're going to deport them. If they are citizens of the United States, we're going to prosecute them. I mean, saying some of the things that he says offends people, okay? So, just telling you like it is. All right, clicking over here on the Rumble link, it shows you that this does come from the Black Conservative Perspective. I'm following his channel. I've given him a thumbs up. I hope you do the same thing for me. All right, let's jump back here and see what Anthony Brian Logan, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, covered up billion-dollar Somali fraud schemes. Okay, pretty much on the same subject, just a different perspective from a different person. Let's see what he has to say.
President Trump is under fire for using the R word to describe Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. However, the bigger story here is the $1 billion fraud scheme that the governor allegedly is trying to cover up. Let's talk about it. How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today we got to talk about the $1 billion fraud scheme in Minnesota that the governor, Tim Walz, is allegedly trying to cover up. Now, this is a really big story, a lot of moving parts. Who does it involve? We already know who it involves. It's mostly your Somali immigrants to the state. Rampant waste, fraud, and abuse happening, and it's just being let go. Tim Walz is allegedly trying to do things to cover it up, silence whistleblowers. There's a lot. Now, President Trump, for some reason, appears to be the focal point of the story because of what he said on Truth Social, using the R word to describe him. That's just the media trying to obfuscate the real issue. They want to use Trump to say, hey, focus on him. Look over there. Don't look over here. All this waste, fraud, abuse, all these criminal actions, don't look at that. Don't look at whistleblowers being silenced. Don't look at our guy, the Democrat, Tim Walz, somehow being at fault. Don't worry about that. Focus on what Trump said. Now, before I get to anything, let's get to what Trump said. And of course, I will link to this. and everything else in the description. If you're on IG, Facebook, etc., visit a link in the bio, go to the corresponding article on the website. But without further ado, let's go ahead and roll it.
In that same post, you mentioned Tim Walz, and you called him what many Americans do find inoffensive or retarded. Do you stand by that claim of calling Tim Walz retarded?
Yeah, I think there's something wrong with him. Absolutely, sure.
But you don't think
You have a problem with it? You know what? I think there's something wrong with him. Anybody that would do what he did, anybody that would allow those people into his state and pay billions of dollars out to Somalia. We give billions of dollars to Somalia. It's not even a country because it doesn't function like a country. It's got a name, but it doesn't function like a country. Yeah, there's something wrong with Walz.
in that same
Now, I agree. There is something wrong with Walz. And what he said about Somalia is the truth. Shout out to the Somalis out there if you're watching. Okay, you're the captain now. Okay, fantastic. But Somalia, really, the government is not really there. It's just the truth. It's just a reality. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. Now, Trump and the White House doubled down on that. You can see this right here on whitehouse.gov. Yes, I'll link to it in the box. And you can see the headline. Yes, there's something wrong with Walz, and it cost taxpayers $1 billion. Okay, so we can see what's going on here. I'm going to just read this bolded part. Nowhere is that more evident than the shocking fraud scandal that took place under the incompetence of deeply disturbed Democrat Governor Tim Walz, in which 78 of the 86 individuals charged so far are of Somali ancestry. Okay, so look, dozens of individuals, largely of East African descent, looted taxpayers out of over $1 billion that was intended for child food assistance in what amounted to the country's largest pandemic relief fraud scheme. That's the truth. Also, fun fact, when you're talking about welfare benefits, Minnesota, #1 in the entire country. Not California, not some big place like that. It's super liberal. Minnesota, #1. All right. Now, let's get to a news clip. It's going to be from News Nation. Of course, again, it will be in the box if you want to see it and hear it without my commentary. If you're on IG, Facebook, etc., you know where it's at. Let's go ahead and roll it.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has come under fire. Hundreds of social service workers publicly are blaming him for a massive fraud scandal that's been rocking the welfare system in the state. Staff at Minnesota Human Services Department say widespread false billing allegedly funneled more than $1 billion in taxpayer funds to nonprofits that are tied to the Somali community. Now, they claim Walz ignored their warnings, even punished whistleblowers. Officials now are still uncovering how deep the fraud went and whether any of the money may have reached terror groups overseas.
Let's pause. Now, it's one thing to have fraud go on and maybe you don't catch it. Maybe you don't know. It kind of, flies under the radar. But if you are aware of it and you make efforts to try and silence anyone from coming forward and saying anything about it, see, now you are part of it. You are part of the scheme yourself.
Investigative correspondent Rich McHugh has been all over this story, really from the jump, as they say. Joins us now. What's the governor's office saying about these new developments?
Hi, Connell. Well, we asked, and the governor's office isn't formally commenting on these posts that were posted onto X as of yesterday by allegedly hundreds of DHS, Minnesota DHS workers. I'll read some just because they're stunning in their rebuke of Governor Walz. Tim Walz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. We let Tim Walz know of fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping fraud. But no, we got the opposite response. They continue. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. Instead of partnership, we got the full weight of retaliation. It's scary, isolating, and left us wondering who we can turn to. Now, in an interesting development, this afternoon, that account was suspended from X for a period of hours, but then put back online. There was a lot of outcry as a commentary account and under a slightly different name with the same amount of followers. We asked the Department of Health Human Services, in Minnesota, to confirm if they are associated with this in any way, and they said they could not. What is not in question here, Connell?
So what are they saying? They're saying they can't confirm or deny whether it's them or not? I think that's them, because if it wasn't them, then they put out a statement and say that account is not associated with us. We did not put that out. That's fake, all this and that. Because you don't want to do something like that, have your name attached to it, and then you get caught up in some kind of lawsuit or something like this. So I think that is them. And if it's not an official account, meaning the DHS bosses made the account, it's employees who are coming forward.
Is the amount of fraud. We're talking $1 billion in fraud that we've reported on. Governor was asked about it yesterday on Meet the Press. Take a listen.
Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Before he answers the question, let's just make sure we're on the same page. So there's already been convictions. It's not an allegation that the fraud happened. The fraud happened. And most of the people that were involved are Somali. These are facts. It's written. I'll link to it in the box. You can see it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Always do your own independent research. The question is, did Tim Walz facilitate it by trying to squash anyone from coming forward and blowing the whistle and saying, hey, this fraud is happening. Hey, this money is going somewhere where it shouldn't be going. Hey, this money is not being used appropriately. Let's see his answer.
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can. But to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy.
But that's not really the question. The question is, were you involved with trying to squash anyone from coming forward and blowing the whistle? That's the actual question. And you could say, oh, it's not about Somalis, when 90% of them were Somali. It is what it is.
Well, it's not just a few, Connell. We've talked to federal sources. They've confirmed it for us. Of the 86 that have been indicted so far, 79 of them are of Somali descent. So it's not a very small bunch. It's the majority of those who have been indicted to date. And
then my question would be, of those who are not Somali, what is their connection to the Somali community? Just like Ilhan Omar and her husband, Tim Mainet. If you're going to look at what they're doing as some kind of fraud, because let's talk about that for a minute since I'm right here. Ilhan Omar got divorced from her brother, allegedly, and her actual husband she had kids with, who she was not married to legally. They had an Islamic ceremony. She got divorced from both of those guys and then got really married to Tim Mainet, the campaign consultant, and 70% of all of Ilhan Omar's campaign money was paid to him as a consultant. And of course, since they're married, that money will come right back to Ilhan. So that could be considered some kind of fraud, potentially. Now, Ilhan is Somali and the husband is not, but it's all part of the same thing with the Somalis.
Tell us, this number is going to go up.
Okay, now I mentioned at the top this concern about maybe some of the money being transferred to groups overseas. What can you tell us, if anything, about that?
So we also have our own reporting on this. We talked to federal sources, both current, former, and also joint terrorism sources who said, yes, this money makes its way to Somalia. And of that money, there's a cut of it that goes to an Al-Qaeda linked terror group, Al-Shabaab. They said we can't do a forensic accounting of it because we don't know once it's over there, but it's there for sure. And they were unequivocal about it. And when we talked to them, Connell.
So that's what's going on. Okay, that is what's going on. We see what's happening. You have monies from the USA that are meant for this food program, help needy kids or whatever. But ultimately, from what I'm able to read, from what I'm able to hear, the money is going to Somalia and ultimately going to the hands of terror groups like Al-Shabaab. It's not very good. Now, as I close, I want to say this. Tim Walz, I want to know what your involvement here is. I want to know what your involvement was with this whole scam. Because if you were involved in any kind of way, trying to cover it up, trying to silence whistleblowers, that's going to be a problem because now you have terror groups overseas being funded aside from the fraud, that's bad enough. But the fraud funded terror groups. So we most certainly can't be doing that here in the good old US of A. And I think I'll leave that right there for now. And what say you? What's your opinion about this whole situation? Do you think Tim Walz was involved in trying to silence whistleblowers? Do you think this money was taken to fund overseas activity? I mean, they already said it. It's like, look, some of the money went to Al-Shabaab. We can't really trace it because, but it's going over there. What do you think the money is being used for? Just for random everyday living expenses, for terror groups, for trying to build that non-existent country into a country? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comments below. You guys know where I'm at. The fraud is real. The waste is real in a place like Minnesota. Aside from this particular issue with the fraud going to Somalia, there's an issue with welfare benefits just being showered upon Minnesota. For what? What's the actual benefit? What is the gain that this money showered upon this state has produced in the state? I'd love to hear anybody tell me. Whatever your thoughts are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.
Alrighty, there you have it. Okay, let's jump over here on the with the Rumble link and show you that this video does come from an Anthony Brian Logan. I am following his channel. I've given him a thumbs up. I hope you do the same thing for me. Now, here again, the fraud is actually being given out. The information is being shared out, but that's not what the mainstream media is focusing on. And here again, I wish Donald Trump would be just a little bit more careful about what he says. I mean, I don't mind the subject that he's providing, but the way he says it. Some people find it offensive. And then they dismiss what the actual problem is and focus on what he's saying. I wish he would get over that. He would make a hell of a lot more headway. And don't get me wrong, I support Donald Trump. I don't necessarily support some of the things he says, though. Sorry, because he could say it, I think, in a better way to get his point across. Now, 79 out of 86 people that have been prosecuted or are being prosecuted, that's 91.8%, 92%. Okay? And here again, the way that that's being said, if they are illegal people, then they need to be removed from the country. If they happen to be citizens, I would think fraud against the government would be eligible for having their citizenship revoked and removed from the country. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, but whatever. Get the criminals out of the country. If they're U.S. citizens, born here, raised here, and they want to defraud the government, then prosecute them and throw their asses in jail. That's what needs to be said. Nothing needs to be brought up about garbage, okay? All right, Vince down. Some more information here about Tim Walz slapped with federal investigation as Minnesota fraud scandals spark bribery allegations. Amazing. Okay, let's see what Vince has to say.
It's not a coincidence that they're targeting Minnesota. If they want to help us,
no, it's
I
not.
welcome that.
No, it's not a coincidence.
I think they do an investigation, find out, but I don't think anybody in here really believes their motive and their timing is about actually doing something about this.
Well, I hate to beat a dead horse, but how many times did we try to tell you? Okay. Absolutely, they are all in on it. When it comes to the situation in Minnesota, the politicians of the local area absolutely knew what was happening and likely were getting kickbacks from the widespread and massive fraud that was going on. Well, we just got the news here today that Governor Tim Walz and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison are now, folks, under congressional investigation for allegedly allowing widespread fraud to occur, because it's almost like this pathetic defense that Tim Walz has been trying to bring. Oh, we've always been against fraud. You know, that's just a small group of criminals. Absolutely was never the case, because as I've been trying to explain to people, when money laundering or embezzlement is that prominent in a local area, it's virtually impossible. It went on for that long without the politicians being aware of the situation. That is completely in contradiction to what we know about the history of political corruption, not just in America, but frankly, the entire world. But I also hope you're starting to notice a pattern here in terms of the entire political machine that the Democrat Party is built on. Frankly, it rings eerily similar to the situation, say, in New York in the early 1900s, which is every time Democrats get into office, they're not actually really like governing or doing anything. Their entire business model is, okay, let's give out a bunch of free money to certain groups, particularly, let's say, poor people, ethnic minorities, immigrants, whatever, and build this like political monopoly based on, oh, free money, let's double the benefits. And of course, at the same time, let's intentionally turn a blind eye to people who are probably receiving the money that shouldn't be, because after all, who doesn't want to have money that they can basically spend on themselves? And then as a result of all of it, right, you have this entire apparatus that's just based on the mere premise of fraud, whether it's financial fraud with all of the COVID stimulus money, or welfare fraud, or heck, the very fact that Act Blue and the Democrat fundraising machine is the same platform that, interestingly, does not even require a CVV code when you donate, right? They want to actually incentivize the system to be able to be abused with stolen credit cards. Yeah, this is the entire Democrat Party. What have I been saying? You could basically describe it as a criminal organization, right? I mean, I'm genuinely curious. If you brought a RICO charge against the fraud kind of infrastructure across Minnesota and maybe the rest of America, how many Democrat politicians could you also bring down in the same situation? I don't know, just a thought, right? But with that said, all right, let's tell you about the update here on the mafia known as the Democrat Party. In today's video, as the Trump administration obviously ramps up their crackdown on the Somali situation in the state of Minnesota. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is not only the best way to support our work, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And with that said, I mean, again, what did I try to tell you about this? Absolutely, the politicians are in on it. Well, it turns out that Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison allegedly agreed to not prosecute the Somalians for their crimes in exchange for, guess what? Yeah, this right here, campaign cash. You know what that's called? Bribery, and it's called a kickback. Take a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Attorney General was asked in those recordings to use his authority to protect businesses under investigation for wrongdoing, and rather than distance himself or remain neutral to allow the legal process to unfold, he responded in those recordings, "Of course, I'm here to help."
Mr. Speaker. Point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, there was a point of order, and I didn't hear a ruling or any resolution of the point of order. Was there a resolution to it?
I'll remind the body that there was no ruling made by the Speaker as to the point of order that was just stated. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Attorney General in those recordings even urged the individuals, let's go fight these people. He was offered campaign contributions during that meeting, contributions that he later accepted. The release of those audio recordings raises questions about what's going on in the Attorney General's office that go directly to the need to pass the legislation that we had previously debated, House File 20. Although he has insisted that nothing came of the meeting, his office lost disclosure of closed investigative
point
data.
Of order.
Since 124.
The A11 will help ensure that what happens behind closed doors in the Attorney General's office sees the light of day. We can protect people's privacy while shining a light on what the Attorney General's office is doing, who is influencing that office, whether it's those under a criminal investigation, nonprofits, corporations, or billionaires with political agendas, because Minnesotans have a right to know when their Attorney General's office is working with them. Minnesotans have a right to know whether the Attorney General is telling the truth truth that nothing came of that meeting. That's why the A11 is so important.
Yeah, what have I been trying to tell you? It's a mafia, it's a criminal organization, and very telling that the mafia member Democrats constantly try to interrupt the speech to shut down the, speaking of the truth, right? Oh, let's this parliamentary measure. Hey, you're not supposed to talk about that, right? But folks, this, if allegedly, and if this is true, is as straightforward as it can get. So the Minnesota Attorney General was knowingly turning a blind eye to the Somali businesses who were being investigated for fraud because they are, of course, doing what? Bribing him, paying him off, which, again, as it turns out here, that does not exactly stand true with Tim Walz's recent excuse that, oh, it's just a couple people. We're actually making the arrest. No, you're not. We're actually cracking down on the fraud. No, you're not. You are in on it.
Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we
There is a criminal operation going on here. And by the way, Tim, I always knew something was off with you, and I think a lot of us did too. You were presented on the campaign trail last year, almost became the vice president, by the way, as his just folksy Midwestern dad. Sure, he's kind of goofy, but he really is a harmless guy. No, I saw right through it. I saw through your psycho wife's eyes too. And of course, that's the case, right? No, a lot of bad stuff here is obviously going on, which is exactly why, as we currently speak, Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison are now under congressional investigation for this very issue that they claim they had nothing to do with. But again, we say, I don't think that's very plausible or likely given the circumstance and how long and how prevalent this was. Take a listen.
President Trump and Republicans are railing against Governor Tim Walz, and the House Oversight Committee, which has launched its own investigation into the fraud, is now requesting documents, records, and communications from both Walz and State Attorney General Keith Ellison after reports they and other state officials may have been warned and ignored those warnings, allowing this fraud to happen.
The state employees in Minnesota rang the bell. They blew the whistle that there was massive fraud, and yet Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, apparently turned a blind eye to that for fear of political retaliation from the large voting bloc of Somalis.
Yeah, close to 80,000 Somalis live in Minnesota. They have become a powerful voting bloc for Democrats. But there are now multiple federal investigations into this fraud. Folks close to those cases tell us that what we've seen so far may be just the tip of the iceberg.
You know, that's a very good point to be made about the voting bloc as well. Because I think it's important here to understand it's not just a case of isolated corruption. Okay, so a politician took some bribe from so-and-so. Does it really affect the wider politics? Corruption's pretty common, so what? But in this case especially, okay, we're not just talking about a few businesses paid off Keith Ellison and Tim Walz. No, these are businesses, of course, in the Twin Cities, which is not that big, and the Somali population is only about 80,000. It's not those many people. So let me say, people know each other. Word gets around. So absolutely, you have to imagine these businesses are not just paying off, personally to the AG. They're also kind of dangling the premise over their head that, hey, either we're going to rally our community, and likely the people who are running these fraudulent businesses are extremely prominent in those neighborhoods, right? Around you, if you choose to turn a blind eye or allow this fraud, or we're going to threaten and go vote against you if you decide to crack down on it. That's absolutely your dichotomy that you have to face. And so this is why I also reject the rhetoric, for instance, from Tim Walz or Jacob Fry about how, the Trump administration is wrongfully indicting a wider community based on the actions of a few. It's like, no, this is not just some random thing where, there was some shady restaurant down the street, it was money laundering, who really cares? No, absolutely. They're influencing the local area. I'm again going to say, I think people probably definitely know what's going on and support these people, clearly because they're voting for the same candidates that the businesses are telling them to. I've made the analogy a million times to the Italian mafia in the Northeast in the 1900s, but I'm again going to say it's usually the way this works, okay? So this is exactly why I say, total no dice absolutely on this idea that it's just isolated, it's just a small issue. No, there is totally a political machine of corruption here going on. And guys, it's not just reserved, as we've established already, by the way, to Tim Walz and Keith Ellison. Multiple state legislators are in on it. Omar Fateh, the candidate for Minneapolis mayor, was doing similar things. And now this recently emerged video and news story from 2016 tells you yet another case of it, where Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, and you're noticing a pattern here, right? Turning a blind eye or supporting or defending the criminals, actually pleaded with a judge back then to show leniency to 9 Somalis who were charged with trying to join ISIS. Keep in mind, this was back in 2016, right? They wanted to join ISIS. Ilhan Omar, at the time a political activist, I assume, that was soon to be a congresswoman just 2 years later, was demanding compassion and, quote, a restorative approach to justice. Yeah. So again, I say it's almost like there's kind of this repeating circle of covering up for each other's crimes, even if that includes, actually joining terrorist organizations. Assimilation is going fantastically, by the way.
Sentencing for 9 Somali American men is set for next week in Minneapolis, but a newly elected official is asking for leniency.
Minnesota Representative-elect Ilhan Omar wrote a letter to the judge asking for compassion instead of decades of prison time.
And Fox 9's Karen Scullin joins us now with what she had to say to defense attorneys and U.S. Attorney Andy Lugar. Karen?
Well, defense attorneys are asking for leniency, but so are several others who filed letters to the judge on behalf of the defendants. But U.S. prosecutors responded tonight with strong arguments why all of them should, in fact, receive the recommended sentence.
Election night was just 2 days ago, but it seems Minnesota Representative-elect Ilhan Omar may have already made her first move as an elected official. In a letter signed November 8th, Omar asks a U.S. district judge for compassion when sentencing 9 Minnesota Somali American men convicted of trying to join the terrorist group ISIS. She says the best deterrent to fanaticism is a system of compassion. We must alter our attitude and approach if we truly want to affect change. We should refocus our efforts on inclusion and rehabilitation.
Yeah, well.
Okay, I'm going to pause that there, folks. All right, there's like 8 minutes left in this video, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. It's amazing. Oh, the best is compassion. Okay, yeah, just let them go out of jail. Don't worry about punishment or rehabilitation. Let's just let them continue to do what they're doing, okay? Unbelievable. That's Democrats for you, though. That's the Democrats for you. All right, this video does come from Vince Dow. I am subscribed to his channel. I've given him a thumbs up. I hope you do the same thing for me. All right, let's jump back here, and I've got one chat from Susie Poll 2016, watching from Virginia. Got this in a comment, so it'll be permanent with this video. All right, thank you very much, Susie. I appreciate that. Okay, again, let me remind you that these videos do come directly from the producer's channel. I've got the links to the videos right here in my description box. Also, a link to the producer's channel. Okay, for example, Dr. Steve Turley here. If you click on this link, it's going to take you to Dr. Steve Turley's channel. Amazing, isn't it? It's like magic. I'm telling you, it's like magic. Okay, and these videos that I did share with you tonight are videos that I've posted on Mertech.com, where I have over 55 no-nonsense, common sense, logic and truth videos. The kind of information that you're not going to get from the mainstream media. It's your one-stop shop for no-nonsense, common sense, logic and truth. Okay, I'd like to share all this information with you, but unfortunately, I don't have time to do so. But I do have my daily news wrap-up coming up, and this is my playlist. I've got 18 videos in there so far. Information from Dave Rubin, The Rubin Report, Robert Gouveia, On the Fringe, MG Show, X22 Report, Wendy Bell, Timcast, Robert Gouveia, Megan Kelly, some more from Dr. Steve Turley, Chicks on the Right, a lot of Black Conservative Perspective, a lot of great information in here, folks. So go ahead and take a break right now. Let me go ahead and rearrange my playlist and get my Rumble Studio set up. Grab a donut and a cup of coffee or a sandwich and a soft drink or a beer, and meet me back here at 9:30 and we'll get this going. But in the meantime, I do want to thank you for your time, for spending it with me. Hopefully, I'll get to see you again later, and may God bless.